Welcome back. Well, as we mentioned earlier, Election Day is coming up on Tuesday, and early voting continues today and tomorrow. We're continuing our profiles of local candidates on the ballot as we welcome Rahman Johnson, candidate for Jacksonville City Council, District 14. Good morning.
Good morning. So good to be here with you, Melissa.
Good to see you. We should disclose you actually used to work here a long time ago at WJCT, which
I
I did not know.
I did. I've been involved from, oh my God, since the 80s when Lydia Stewart was here in a program called Young Voices. And I have done many, many things with WJCT on the
Yeah.
volunteer and on the work side.
You're a broadcast journalist.
I am.
And what prompted your move into office? You also have held another
I
office.
held office, if you can imagine it, 25 years ago.
Oh my gosh.
I ran when I was a student at Edward Waters, and I was at the time I was an associate producer at Channel 4,
Uh-huh.
and I was going to school to be a journalist, and I kept seeing things that I wanted to change in the community. So no one was stepping up to the plate, and I ran, and it opened the door for other young people to get involved. I was in my early 20s when I ran, and like I said, I was a student. And then after me, Reggie Fullwood ran for city council, and
Mhm.
other young people came and
And
got
you were
involved.
on Soil and Water
I was on Soil and Water.
Conservation?
I was.
Wow.
I was.
So what prompted you to jump back in and run for office? So this is District 14, which
District
is a
14.
West Side district.
Yes, it includes Argyle and Chimney Lakes and Oakleaf Plantation, this complete 103rd Street, all the west side. Let me tell you, I'm a professor now at Edward Waters University, and I left one morning and my house was in District 10. By the time I got home, it had magically been transported to District 14.
Uh-huh.
And I looked at the district. It's so much more diverse than it's ever been. It's a lot browner. And looking at the new district lines, I wanted to make sure that we had representation that made sense. And so for me, I reflected the district. I'm a storyteller, which is what I've spent my life
Mhm.
doing. And I felt that I could bring these stories to bring voice to certain stories. And most importantly, I started getting calls. There was a social media campaign, hashtag Run Rockman Run. I started getting calls from Ben Frazier and the NAACP and other people saying, hey,
Mhm.
it's an opportunity for this district to be represented by someone who actually looks like the district.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So what would you do for the district, and what do you think are the biggest priorities the new council should undertake?
Well, number one, I've talked to people throughout the district. I didn't want to just come into the race and say these are my priorities, but I wanted to talk to people in the district. And number one is infrastructure. There's a lot of issues when it comes to road widening and ditches and just amenities, sidewalks, things like that. And so that's something that is a very important part for District 14. Additionally, public transportation, ensuring that the public opportunities for the transportation that runs the city from that side to connect it to other sides is there. We
Mhm.
want to connect that and make sure it's safe and accessible. Also, public safety is number one. People just want to feel safe in their homes and communities, which means we need more police. And last but not least, economic development. And I know that's a kind of a cliche term, but we want to make sure that people who live on the west side don't have to go to Mandarin or South Point or somewhere else to go to work. We want to have economically viable businesses that pay a living wage in the community.
Let's start with infrastructure.
Sure.
How would you pay for all of the infrastructure improvements we need?
Well, there are dollars that are already appropriated, but the problem right now is they haven't been pushed forward, right? And so I believe as a council member that I would not only come up with innovative ideas to use the dollars that are already there, but to find other ways. I just sat on the La Villa Redevelopment Project task force through the Downtown Development Investment Authority.
Mhm.
And one of the things we looked at is the fact, how can we use DOT dollars, right, to uh, put it with what we're already doing with DIA to showcase La Villa. Well, we can do that in other sides of town as well. There's state projects, there are DOT projects on the federal level, but putting those things together. And unfortunately, we have silos, people over in this side and that side, and not talking and not using the money that's already allocated.
Public safety.
Yeah.
Jacksonville has been the murder capital of Florida off and on for
Yes.
decades.
Yeah.
We keep throwing more money at the problem. It's not really helping, although there was an effort some years ago to get at the prevention and intervention aspects of crime rather than the enforcement with the Jacksonville Journey.
Yes.
That was starting to make a dent, and then it got defunded. So how would simply hiring more police solve the problem? Because that hasn't solved the problem before.
Well, it's not a panacea, and there will be no panacea. It's going to be this and that, not specifically this, right? And I believe that in those spaces, we do need to put more dollars. According to the Department of Justice,
Mhm.
Jacksonville has about 1.6 police officers per 1,000 people, and we really need to have about 2.6 to 2.9 officers per 1,000 people. So we do need more officers so that we can do community policing, but we also need to have programs like the Jacksonville Journey. Right now, you can't do community policing because you have officers who are running around trying to get to the next call, so they don't have time to get out of their cruisers and stop and interact with the
Mm.
community. And I think having that, especially in light of all the other issues that comes with policing and people and deaths by cop and the things we're finding out, I think it's important for us to have that community aspect, but it only happens when we have the manpower and the programs working in tandem.
You're running as a Democrat for
I am.
District 14.
I am.
There's a Republican supermajority on the city council,
Yes.
although a number of Democrats are running to try to change the political balance on that body somewhat. How would you work if you were elected, as you would be in the minority? How would you get some of your priorities through?
One word: relationships. I've spent the entirety of my career as a journalist and now as an academic building relationships, whether it be with people to tell me their stories, whether it be with students. I've sat on boards and commissions throughout my life and throughout my career, but
Hmm.
I do have relationships with some of the members of council. And though we may not agree with how to get there because we have different party affiliations, at the end of the day, potholes and streetlights do not have a party affiliation. And so I don't believe that a Democrat or a Republican on council is going to determine the issue, but it's about can I sit down and have a coffee with you? Can we talk it through? What do we need to do to get to the solution? And it's all about solutions. And I believe that I'm a fun person to hang out with, and I think my council members would see that, and we can get a lot of stuff done.
I've been asked by a lot of listeners to put this to every candidate who comes through
Sure.
here. If the prospect of selling JEA comes up again, which some fear it might, what would you do?
Absolutely no. This is our community utility. I know people who work there. I understand the needs of having a utility that's owned by our city. And more importantly, this is something they're not making more of. It's like kind of like land. They're not making more land. They're not making other public utilities. So for the sale of JEA, even without hearing it, I don't see the need of selling it or even entertaining that idea.
How important do you think it is that trust is restored in our local council? The JEA affair and other controversies have eroded trust in this body.
It's absolutely essential. One of the things I hope to do is, especially since I teach it and we talk about Web 3.0 and cyberspace and using that, I want to be able to use technology to consistently bring City Hall to people. And definitely people in District 14, but even people in Jacksonville. We need to use technology, which we learned during COVID that we can do, and create opportunities to connect us rather than divide us. So it's important for accountability, transparency, and trust to always reach out and always solicit information, because that's going to help us. Just talking about it moves our relationships forward.
As a professor at an HBCU, what are your thoughts about the governor restricting or refusing the teaching of African American studies?
I think it is ludicrous. It does not gel with any kind of educational understanding. I had a conversation this morning with our state senator, Tracy Davis, and that was one of the things that she is fighting so hard in the legislature to make sure that doesn't happen. And of course, being a super minority in the legislature, it's hard, but we have got to have people who stand up, who are not just saying, I'm going to vote the party label because this is, or the party line because this is what the governor wants. We've got to have people who say that academically it makes no sense. Even the bill that was passed to have accreditation. I'm currently a PhD candidate at Jackson State University and have done extensive research. For them to say that accreditation should be changed to accrediting agencies every cycle doesn't make sense because it does not allow for a continuity of education. So
Mhm.
I think the governor and the governor's office is completely wrong on this one. And what they should do is let the academics stick with the academicians.
Well, as I mentioned, early voting is underway today and tomorrow, or you can vote on Election Day. Wherever you are in Duval County, get out and vote. There's a special election going on up in Georgia, too, for our South Georgia listeners. Vote in that. And thank you for coming in. Rahman Johnson, candidate for Jacksonville City Council, District 14 on the west side.
Thanks, Melissa.
Is it the best side?
It is the best side. Duval.
We'll be back in a minute as we take a listen inside JME, local artists spinning in our Jacksonville music experience. That's next.